In the time of Arthur, a tale was untwined beside the tarn Wathalan as told in the book. To Carlisle he came, of the conquering kind, with knights and with nobles who hunt in the brakes, who harry the herd and on the deer dine, and drive the stags down the steep woodland bank, deep into the dells, to herd with the hinds. When hunting was done, the hart by the brook, both the king and the queen came, and riding between, Gawain, garbed in green, led Gaynor down the track. Gawain led Gaynor down green woodland rides, in a glittering gown that gleamed so gay, all trimmed with bright ribbons, so the tale reads, ribbons of red, and in richest array. Her hood of grey hue her shadowed head hides, in purples and silks, stones glint in a spray, and clad in a cloak the rain hardly heeds, set with bright sapphires she rides on her way, sapphires and celadonies stitched to her hems. Her saddle is slick with jewels and silk, and white as wet milk, as gaily she glides. So Dame Gaynor the good, how gaily she glides down the glade with Gawain by a mossy green well, and this man on his mount by the White Queen abides, Burgundy born by book and by bell, and leads her a long way at the lake's lapping sides, by a lush laurel at the foot of the fell. Arthur, earl flanked, earnestly rides, and sets them their stations, truly to tell, their trysts with the stags. By trees they abide, each lord on demand by a trunk takes his stand, with bow and with hound where the branches reach wide. And under the boughs they bide brash and bold, to kill barren does on the hillsides so bare, and the men are amazed the herds to behold, and hearken to hunting horns brazen their blare. They cast off their leashes on cliffs so cold, encourage their hounds to kill and not care, culling the does, and in numbers untold, with hounds fell and feisty, whose loping spells fear, as they sweat, pant and slaver, and paw on the mould. They sniff and they kill, by the woods and the hill, the deer in the dell, all scatter and scare. And darkly the deer drift through the dim woods, and dreading her death, she cowers the doe, like rapids on rivers and wild rushing winds, like boars that blare from their nostrils and blow. The hunters they hail, and their word wakes the wilds, and rankles the horns that rise up from the roe. No rest will they grant, and nature is riled, though greyhounds in green groves gladly they go. Yes, gladly they go, under groves growing wild. The king calls the chase, and they follow the trace at a cantering pace. They would hunt the whole world. Yes, they surge in their sport, the seemliest knights, seeking their sovereign deep in the green. All but Sir Gawain, chivalrous knight, who is wooded with Gaynor under the green. By the laurel they land, the leaves gleaming bright, by the box and the barberry, soft was their sheen. In the bright of the light, an eye-splitting sight, a marvel of midday, a sight never seen, I quiver to contemplate. Glum grew the light, the day grew as dark as midnight's grim murk, even Arthur was irked, in haste to dismount. On foot they all fled, a coward each man. They flew to the forest, they flew to the fells. The rain ran in runnels, they made wretched moans, spurred on by snow like a harrowing of hell. Like flames from a lake, their hope undermined. Lucifer laughs, and in madness he hails, laughing at Gaynor with lungs made of wind, and madly the mountains knelled with their yells, their cheeks and their chest plates tear-wet and wild. They cried, "We are cowed, and our lady is cursed," their fear spelled aloud, each wept like a child. She stops and she shudders, Dame Gaynor the gay, and says to Sir Gawain, What do you think? It is but an eclipse, I heard scholars say. Thus he comforts his queen, and tries not to shrink. She cries, Sir Cador, Constantine, Clegius, and Kay are uncourteous knights, who cower and blink. By cross and by creed they have scurried away, and the gruesomest ghost awaits on the brink. Grieve not, cried Gawain, to the ghost I shall say, you are spirit, not flesh. I'm not craven nor nesh, your woes I'll unmesh, and I'll send you away. All bare was its body, and blackened its bone, all shrouded in cloud, and evilly clad. It yammered and yowled, fit to cave in a brain, no womanly skin or complexion it had. It stopped, and it stood as still as a stone, it moaned and it mumbled and murmured like mad. To the grisly ghost Sir Gawain has gone, at a run like a raider, never afraid. I am rarely a craven, was Gawain's refrain. On her skull of grim bone a toad sat enthroned, and bleak as a moan her eyes glowed with pain. A gleam like the glade, the ghastly ghost glides, enclosed in a cloud, in clothing unclear, beset with spry serpents that cling to its sides. My tongue dare not tell of the toads at its ear. He unscabbards his sword, and boldly abides, his countenance still, unquivered by fear. The hounds slink in hollows, and chivalry hides, and the ground is aghast, all grimy and drear. Even the greyhounds stand gaunt, yet hang near. The birds in a host all stare at the ghost, and screech like the lost as the leaf meets the seer. The beaters all heard, though they stood far behind, the jaw on the dewlap, the channering chin. The knight called on Christ, he cried to the wind, By the King on the cross, the cleanser of sin, tell me, cursed creature, what's on your mind, and why walk these woods so wasted and thin? I used to be fair. My flesh was once fine, christened and chrismed, and kings were my kin. Bold, brash, and brave, those ancestors of mine, and God grants me grace to do penance in this place, and I turn my gaunt face to screech at your queen. I was brighter than her, than sunlight in May, brighter than Brangwain or Beryl of old. Friendship and freedom and unfettered play I had greater than Gaynor, and good hoards of gold. Of palaces, parks, of ponds such display, of towers, of towns, of treasures untold, of castles and countries, of cliffs in my day. But now I am snatched off, shivering and cold, in a fever of fretting and cowering in clay. Lo, courteous knight, death's a doleful sad blight, let me once have a sight of Gaynor the gay. And Sir Gawain the good goes up to the queen, and brings to the corpse the king's beautiful bird. It says, Welcome, Gaynor, such woes I have seen. Look, doleful death made your mother his bride. My cheek was once crimson, like the rose on the green, my skin like the lilies that bloomed at its side. Now I'm a ghost, and grisly my groan, in Lucifer's lake I'm compelled to abide. This is my lot, girl, listen and learn. Your fur and your ring, your mirrors that sing, your dukes and your king shall be harried and burn. This death you shall die, I say without doubt, so take hearty heed while you are still here. When in richest array as you ride in the rout, be kind to the poor whilst there's still time to care. When beggars and bairns beset you about, beware, for your body will ride on a bier. And those who once doted will soon turn to doubt, then nothing will help but the holiest prayer. For the prayers of the poor may purchase you peace. Give them alms at the gate, and send them your meat, when you're sitting in state, long before your surcease. Before your surcease, when the feast is being served, and I rot in the dungeon, doomed there to dwell, needy and naked, scorned and enslaved. My home is a simmer, an outpost of hell. By a dozen black demons I'm basted and seared on brass grates and brimstone like a steak on a grill. My skin is all blistered, my eyes are both bleared, my tongue torn in two by the torments I tell. Hear as I speak what you fear to know. Now think upon this, for your sin is amiss. You're a hussy for bliss, and you'll share in my woe. I grieve for your fate, said Gaynor, and wish you redeemed. Mother, I ask, though I barely dare, whether matins and mass might serve to wash you of sin, or jewels of the earth help you to fare better. Might bishops with beads bring you to bliss, or cloisters and covenants heal you of care? For you are my mother. How horrid it is! Your body was beautiful, now it is bare. Yes, worms bared my body, and who is to blame? You know this is true, vows were broken, I rue the day, so do you, I am writhing in pain. Then tell, groaned Gaynor, what penance might save you, and what saint plead for thy sake? For baleful beasts blast your body with blight, your blood blinds my eyes, can mere worms break you? Worms are my paramours, writhing and white, they sink me down softly to dwell in a lake. Even these words are wombed in black night, and wretched the worms, each writhes like a snake. In torment I toss, Gaynor know this, were 900 masses done at matins and nones, my saved soul would soon grope gladly for bliss. May he bring you to bliss, who bought us with blood, who hung clear on a cross and was crowned with thorns, christened and chrismed with candle and creed, in a font of cold stone, baptized newborn. And mild Mother Mary, who nurtured the seed and swaddled the bairn of Bethlehem born. May they give me the grace to turn your fate good through prayers at Mass and matins at morn. Keep mindful at Mass, and meekly implore him who hung on a rood, staunched evil with good, with his deluge of blood to abide at your door. I stretch forth my hand, I repent as you scold, a million masses may silence your groaning. But one thing, cried Gaynor, I need to be told, what sin angers Christ that I should be disowning? Pride and pretences, read the prophets of old made plain to all people, pay heed to their preaching. Pride's branches bear bitter fruit, you must be bold, for thousands are doomed, ignoring God's bidding, all of them damned, stripped bare of bliss. In Christ put your trust, to purge you of lust, or suffer you must. Gaynor, hear this. Now hear me, wept Gaynor. Grisly ghost, what is the penance or prayer that will save? Meekness, it moaned, is what you need most, and to pity the poor you'll be one in the grave. The charitable please Christ more than the chaste. It's better to give alms than be boastful or brave. These are the gifts of the Holy Ghost's grace, inspiring each soul salvation to crave. But speak no more, to the chantry make haste. Queen, in your comfort, who charms a whole state, hold these words in your heart. We live once, then depart. Child, look to your fate. How shall we fare? Cried Gawain, who are fickle and fight, and are quick to oppress the poor of the land, and overrun the world, and fight against right, and war for men's worship by might of our hands. Your king is too covetous, so are his knights. The great wheel will revolve, but a moment it stands still. When he's majestic and high in his might, the wheel shall swing low, as justice demands. Thus shall misfortune bring misery and blight. Fell fortune by night is an awesome wheelwright, whose spokes turn in spite at a touch of his hands. In France you have fought, and by force you have won vassals and villains to drudgery doomed. Brittany and Burgoyne are both under your thumb. Amid deafening clamour, all France has been claimed, and Guienne regrets it was ever begun. There are no living left, not wounded or maimed, and yet the rich Romans will soon overrun your fabled round table, turned over and shamed. The Tamar will stop you, and Arthur will fall. Gawain, you must choose Tuscany or crows, for Arthur shall lose his throne to his thrall. A knight shall come, stealthily seizing the crown, and at Carlisle be crowned as a king. He'll not pause to parley. Take the land for his own, and slander and strife on Britain he'll bring. They'll tell you in Tuscany treason's enthroned. You'll turn in your tracks to hear such a thing. The Round Table's glory will lose all renown, and at Rumsey the red blades shall ring. He'll die in distress, the doughtiest of all. Get you well, Gawain, boldest knight in Britain. In a ditch you'll be slain, and Fate's blade shall fall. Fate's blade shall fall, and slice you like stubble on Cornwall's coast. Pay heed to my words, and there honest Arthur, overcome by the rabble, shall be sliced by swords, most woeful his wounds, and routed and ruined every knight of the Table. They'll all die that day, lives lost in the wind. Surprise shall defeat them, a knight shielded in sable, a St. Andrew's cross with silver entwined. I said, sable his shield, sooth for to say, in King Arthur's hall the child plays at ball, who shall conquer you all cruelly that day. Good day to you, Gawain, and Gaynor be good. My time has run out, though I had more to tell, for I must walk my way through yonder dark wood, to whimper with woe and to broil in hell. By him who righteously hung on the rood, remember my pain and the place where I dwell. Lift up my soul and seek succour from God. Buy matins and masses, and pay for them well, for masses are medicines, purging all pride. Now a mass seems more sweet than the spices you eat. And with no more debate, away the ghost glides. With grisly gasps the ghost glides away, groaning and griping and bawling aloud. Wind buffets the world and brings back the day. The sun waxes clear and uncovers the cloud. The king blows his bugle and rides in array. His fair knights in the field, they flock in a crowd. To the queen they all ride, they dare not delay, and speak to her mildly, undaunted and proud, pretending no weather had forced their retreat. Pomp's princes in pride, Gaynor silks at their sides, to rondel set ride, to drink and to eat. Arthur sat at his supper with servants at his side, under slivers of silk, with dainties galore, with wealth at his willing, and wine at his word, with pastry and bacon, gold-leafed without flaw. There came a musician whose psaltery cried, and a lissom lady led a worn man of war. He rode through the hall, and grimly he called, hailing King Arthur, hearty and sure, and he said to the sovereign, splendidly crowned, "You're unequalled in might. I'm an heir and a knight, so match reason with right, and be more renowned." Manly in his mantle, Arthur sat at his meat, in silk trimmed with fur, all ermine white, knitted and knotted, calm and complete, with tassels of topaz embroidered so tight. He lifted his eyes, all grey and effete, his beard red-brown, and his mail gleaming bright, the seemliest sovereign to sit in a seat that ever a vassal had held in his sight. And comely the king, too composed to compete, says, "Come, burly wight, from your hot horse alight. What worries you, knight? Make confession complete." He was the worthiest knight you ever beheld. His robe was a glory, no grass was as green. His lady bore blankets embroidered with birds, beaten with gold, and with clasps like a queen. The plaits in her hair were bejewelled like a bride's. her head-dress was ribboned, with gold weaved between, and comely her crown, bright to behold, with curious kerchiefs, each clasped with a pin. Her apparel, provocation to princes of might, and each knight longed to hold her bright birds weave bold, a sweet pain to behold in front of her knight. A knight in full colours, his arms in full sheen, his helmet crest comely and bright to behold. His mail and his mantle were blazoned and clean, and bordered about with hot burnished gold. His tabard milk white, and weaved like a dream, with trappings to match, as I have been told, with a spear on his shoulder of shimmering sheen, with boars' heads of black, and brows glowering bold. His steed was with sandalwood smeared to the heel, his chevron adorned like a bold unicorn, as sharp as a thorn, with a spike of pure steel. In steel was he surfeited, sitting stern on his steed, adorned with bright stars which shone in a spray. His garments and gloves were glowing like gold, weaved with bold ribbons in richest array, with shin guards of iron, cut cleanly and cold, his knees jewelled green, an emerald display. His lance was aloft, and his aspect was bold, his mount was a Frisian steed hot from the fray, but skittish and nervous, well trained for war, yet distracted to see such bright fleur-de-lis, such games and such glee it had not seen before. Then the king called him close, and spoke in his ear. "From whence are you come, and what is your will? Tell me your provenance, what is your fear, and why does your steed stop and stand so still?" The knight lifted his visor, and viewed the king clear, and watched him most wisely, staring until he said, "Whether Kaiser or king, I bid you hear, you must find me a knight to fight by his skill, someone who strives and not to seek fame." And the king on a height cried, "Linger all night, you courteous knight, and tell me your name." "My name is Sir Galeron, without any guile, the greatest of Galway in groves and in glens, in Carrack, in Cummack, in Coningame, in Kiel, in Lonwick, in Lanark's, and in Lawdon's hills. You have won by deceit and duplicitous guile a gift for Sir Gawain, my heart on a grill. Yet you'll wring both your hands and worry the while, before any knight should transgress my will. For my will is as iron, it will not bend or yield, while my head is still here. He must come without fear, with a shield and sharp spear, to fight in the field. On the field I will fight, I pledge by my faith, with any fool on earth who is fierce and free-born, for to lose my lordship makes me wince like a wraith, and no one shall live who would laugh me to scorn. But we live in the woodland. My knights earn their worth by hunting the herd with hound and with horn. So go, knight, and gladly, for we have no wrath, but will match you at midday. Do not be forlorn. And rest well, brave knight, for I ride forth tonight." But Gawain, greatest of all, strode forth through the hall, not afraid of his pall, all arrayed for the fight. Through a pompish pavilion with purple-draped walls embroidered with beads and dazzling with light, Gawain led Galeron past chapels and halls to a tall chimneyed chamber where embers burned bright. They haltered his steed and led him to stall, where hay hung from hatches, a horse's delight, a brocaded bedspread and squires at his call. They opened the cellar for feasting the night, with torches ablaze and standards between, plates to dazzle the sight of so worthy a knight, of such girth and such height, with their silvery sheen. In silver so bright they serve him the best white wine in the world, in cups of clear glass, with luscious meats of fowl, fish and beast, rich dainties and delicacies smothered with glaze. And once bold Galeron has gone to his rest, the king calls for counsel, with anger he glows. Take heed, my lords, lest your honour is lost. Which knight will fight Galaron? Grimly he growls. Sir Gawain says, King, there is no cause to grieve. I will fight with this knight to uphold my right, by my pledge and my plight, my lord, with your leave. I know well, said the king, you are champing to fight, but I'd not for our lordship see your life lost. Let go, said Sir Gawain, God stands with the right, he shan't escape scot-free, unscathed by our host. And at dawning of day, doughty and bright, they heard matins and mass with no trembling or haste, pitched pavilions at Plumpton, their pomp in full sight, where no knights before had fought hand to hand. They set lists on the level, marked out on the land, 3 sops soaked in wine they brought to Gawain to settle his brain, till the king gave command. The king gave command to the Earl of Kent to be kindly and courteous to Galaron the knight, and bade him on dainties to dine in his tent, while all of his men were armed left and right. And after Queen Gaynor glumly they went, while Galaron was feasted under her sight. And horsemen grasped reins, and bade their mounts wait, as lords at the lists reined in to alight. All but the 2 strongest in stirrups they stood. And King Arthur's throne was set high on the loam. Gaynor let out a moan for Gawain the good. Gawain and Galaron spur on their steeds, all glittering gold their armour and gear, led to the lists by 2 lords in bright weeds, with men armed with maces to bring up the rear. Each digs in his spurs, his horse's side bleeds, and out in the field each has planted his spear. Shafts of hard wood are splintered to bits, for each joys in jousting, and neither knows fear. Lance shafts a shiver, and shields in full sheen, and with swords sharp and bright, with a mail-splitting smite, they clash knight on knight, Gawain clad in green. And Gawain the good is garbed in bright green, with griffins of gold engraved on his shield, knitted and knotted with chevrons between. On a sauntering steed he swerves to one side, the other knight spits, eyes slitted and mean, cries, "Why do you faint? Are you sly or afraid?" and swats with his sword, a gash red and clean in the shoulder of Gawain. Blood soaks through the braid. The clashing and clamour make fearful ado. The sword, a bright bane, splits his mail coat in twain to the white collar bane, his shield cleaved in 2. It carves through the cantle, gouges into the knight, through his shield and shoulder a hilt's depth or more, and his unscathed assailant laughs from a height, and Gawain is angry, grieving full sore. "I'll reward you this rout and repay you aright." Then he gallops at Galaron, hard as he dare, rips into his blazon, through mail burnished bright, his shimmering sword shearing through like a spear. So Galaron's steed shudders with fright, eyes rolling white with tottering gait. The knight faces his fate, and with stirrups stretched straight, canters back to the fight. With stirrups stretched straight, fiercely he strikes, flails at Sir Gawain as if he were straw. His lady aloft, shrilly she shrieks when she sees all the blood, and how freely it flows. But the lords and the ladies all clamour alike, and thank God for Gawain, knight without flaws. With a swipe of his sword, Galaron strikes, smites Gawain's steed. It founders and falls, and Gawain, he grieves, he calls on the rude. For his slain steed he weeps, from his stirrups he leaps, and a vengeance he reaps for Grezel the good. "Grezel is gone," cries Gawain. "By God, the handsomest horse to ever eat hay! By him who in Bedlam was born for our good, I'll vanquish this night and avenge you this day." "I'll give you my Frisian steed," Galaron said. "It will never blench or be slain in the fray." "Be done with your Frisian, I wish it were dead." Gawain stood still in a doleful display. "I mourn for no manticore, my stallion of war." And he stood by his steed, so stalwart in need, and his eyes seemed to bleed with weeping so sore. With woe and with weeping he turns to the knight, rounds on his rival whose wounds are so red, who draws back in dread at the desperate sight of Gawain undaunted, who so wants him dead. Thus we'll drive out the day and bring on black night, and the sunset shall stain where knight and horse bled. In the midst of the joust Galeron alights, brandishing his blade like a demon of dread, and they bound to do battle, their brands flashing bright, till shields hang in shreds, and chainmail turns red, and the lords shrink with dread to watch such a fight. And fighting on foot upon the fair field, as fresh as two lions, fierce for the kill, it's wondrous to watch the pair of them wield their weapons, and Gawain does not flag in will, but shoves his sharp sword under Galeron's shield into his waist, wounding him well. No stuffing to stop it, armour caves into steel, but Galeron stands like a stone as men stare, takes a lunge at Gawain between visor and chain, and if he's not slain, it's by less than a hair. And hefting and hacking on helms they are hewing, their barrels all bashed in, on borders so bright, each clash of the sword the precious stones strewing, till the field glints and gleams in the midst of the fight. The shields on their shoulders are shabby and shredding their tabards, not one rivet stands straight. Then lords rue the day that this bargain was brewing, that set night on night and would never abate, and Arthur feels mangled in soul and in brain. Both Sir Lot and Sir Lake little meaning can make, Gaynor weeps for the sake of gallant Gawain. And weeping, Dame Gaynor, her eyes wet and grey, is aggrieved at Sir Gawain's grisly gashes, when grim-faced Gawain, like a hawk at its prey, sweeps in with his sword, plunges and slashes down the side of Sir Galeron. He carves as through clay, and rips through the mails as if they were rushes. He strikes him a blow fit to fillet and flay, leaves him grovelling on ground, and blood flows in gushes. And grovelling on ground he groans on the green, and yet wounded he rose, and on Gawain he closed, lunging straight at his nose with his sword quick and keen. And cruel and keen his sword carves through air, backhanded and brutal he lethally strikes, his sword weighted with woe for Gawain I fear, but he gets his comeuppance, and this part I like. Just when he thinks to slay, then and there his sword slips and slants, and on the mail slides, and Gawain rebounds, grabs hold like a bear, and chokes him. His lady, how shrilly she shrieks, and screams at Dame Gaynor, plaintive with pain. "Lady, great is your might, have mercy, my knight is in such a sore plight, he won't bother you again." And wilfully Gaynor goes up to her king, snatches off her crown, and cowers at his feet, crying aloud, "You are rich, royal, and strong, but I am your wife, and your will's not complete if not wound up with mine. To kill him is wrong. Equal their wounds, look how freely they bleed, their shoulders in shreds, their shields unstrung. The groans of Sir Gawain are a grisly creed, gut-wrenching groans that grieve me full sore. For your wife bends her knee. Gracious Lord, humour me, get your knights to agree to bring an end to this war." But then spoke Sir Galeron. "Sir Gawain the Good, I never knew there was such a knight. I relinquish my claim, I swear by the rood. To your lord and his retinue I resign my right. I am henceforth your vassal, a pledge made with blood. Of all men on earth you are greatest in might." And meekly he made for the king where he stood, and surrendered his sword, which was burnished so bright, crying, "Of rents and of riches I make my release." And down knelt the knight, shouting up to the height, and the king stood upright, and commanded the peace. The king commanded peace as he stood upright, and Gawain relented for the king's sake, and these were the lords who leapt up in his sight: Yvain and Uriain, and Arach of the lake, Sir Meliaduc, Sir Marach, all knights of great might, and the two trenchant toilers both barely could speak without burly helpers to keep them upright. So bruised and so bloodless, their faces both bleak, so pale of complexion, so weakened by wounds, and each pledged for peace, as a God-sent release, that the bleeding should cease, pledged, and held up his hands. Behold, your king gives you Gawain the Good, all of Glamorgan, with its glades bright and green, the worship of Wales to wield as you would, and Kifra Castle of bronze colour and sheen, and all Ulster Hall to have and to hold, Wayforth and Waterforth, and all lands between, 2 baronies of Brittany, with burgesses bold, with towers embattled, fit for a queen. I endow you as duke, dubbed by my hands, but make peace with this knight, who put up such a fight, and resign him your right, and give back his lands. I give you Galaron, and without any guile, all lands that stretch between Locher and Lair, Carrack, Cummack, Coningame and Kiel, all for yourself, and thereafter your heirs, the Lother, the Lemmock, the Loynack, the Leal, with welds and with woodlands and waters so fair. But bid you remain, and bide here a while, and at the round table our wrongs to repair. In this field I enfife you, as free as the air. And the king and the queen, with lords riding between, weave the woodlands so green, and to Carlisle they fare. To Carlisle comes Arthur with knights keen and bright, through glades so green, and in royal array, to the round table with 2 wounded knights, saved by the surgeons, so they say. The king and the queen all loving as right, Gawain and Galaron made dukes that same day. He was wed with his lady, love supplanting the fight, with gems for his gifts, Sir Galaron the gay. Thus Gawain and Galaron put difference away, and when wounds congealed and all grudges healed, his knighthood was sealed till his dying day. And Gaynor wrote letters, forbearing the feast, to monks and to nuns, to chant and to sing. She pressed them to pray, both bishop and priest, with myriad masses, her mother to bring out of burning. And scholars, learned and finest, were sent throughout Britain the mass bell to ring. And all of it happened in Inglewood Forest, to knights and to ladies, to huntsman and king. And to catch such a quarry is not to be spurned, that strength, pride and power are gone in an hour. By chivalry's flower let the lesson be learned.